Welcome back to our On-Call Plus Autism special here on GMA Now. I'm Dr. Timothy Johnson. We have a great panel assembled here to talk about one of the fastest growing developmental disorders in the U.S. here in New York. Two leading pediatricians, Dr. Lou Cooper and Dr. Ari Brown. We also have three parents, Ken Rybel, who has a 13-year-old son, Christopher, with a disorder, actress Didi Khan, who has a 16-year-old adopted son, Danny, and in Los Angeles, the star of the CBS series Criminal Minds, whose 21-year-old daughter, Mia, lives with the disorder. So it's time to raise the elephant that's usually in the room of any discussion about autism, and I'm going to turn to you, Ari, first, to ask you to summarize what we do and do not know about the relationship, if any, between childhood vaccines and autism.
Boy, thanks for handing me the hot potato, right? Well, I think over the past decade, there have been questions that have been asked. Starting in 1998, there was a study that came out of England. It was a small study, 8 patients, looking at the combination measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine and whether children who got that combination vaccine later developed autism. Over the past 10 years, numerous studies have tried to replicate the findings of that original study. In fact, one just came out this past month. And the answer is nobody can replicate the findings of this study. And if you look at what makes good science is people in London have the same findings as people in New York as they find in Japan. And simply it has not panned out to be the answer for why children develop autism. The other thing that came up in the late 90s was mercury being used as a preservative in vaccines. And that question was raised. Could it be mercury poisoning that these children were really not children who had autism but had mercury poisoning? Well, that question has really been laid to rest because the Food and Drug Administration said we need to get rid of the preservative in these vaccines because of the potential concern for any harm. Even though there was no harm that was found, the theoretical risk was raised. And so as of 2001, there are no childhood immunizations that actually contain mercury as a preservative. There is some used in production process and a few vaccines, not all, and the amount is very scant. So if you look at the autism rates, you would say, well, since the mercury was taken out of the vaccines, you should see a reduction in the rates of autism if that in fact was the case. Well, we're now in 2008. Autism rates are still climbing despite the fact that mercury preservative was taken out. Those are the two main questions that people ask about vaccines when they have concerns about autism. And what I tell people is at the end of the day, scientists take concerns seriously, and these have not been poo-pooed at all. They've been studied extensively, those two questions, and the data is just not there to support it.
And Lou, I'll ask you about the latest wrinkle in this field in terms of possible causes of the so-called mitochondrial disorder. There are some who have suggested that what vaccines do is promote a problem in kids who have a sensitivity, a genetic predisposition, or the actual condition called mitochondrial disorder. What's the skinny on that?
Children who have mitochondrial disorders are far safer receiving their vaccines on time than being left to the ravages of these vaccine-preventable diseases. So no one can say that any given vaccine may not be harmful to any given child. That's why we have a vaccine injury compensation program.
There's a question of, is it coinciding with that time of development when the vaccine is administered that causes...
Both vaccines and the problem are so common at that age.
At that age, around 18 months to 24 months. So would it be more efficacious? Is that the word?
Effective.
Yeah, more effective.
Efficacious.
Efficacious, that's what it is. Would it, I'll do it again. Would it be more effective to give that vaccine not at that exact stage when the piece of socialization occurs? Wouldn't it be much more better to give it later on or at a different time?
Well, we've got a couple of people who can answer that question. Ari, take a crack at it.
Well, I'll take a crack at it. Lou says he wants to do it, though, so let's hand it to him.
Okay, Lou.
Didi, the reason the vaccines are given when they're given relates to when those diseases are most disastrous to the children, so that we have to get that protection in when the kids are most vulnerable. The timing of the vaccines represents 3 things. Number 1, when is the disease so horrible and devastating? Number 2, what are the characteristics of the vaccine? When can it be most effective? And then number 3, how do we put it together in a way that parents can get to the doctors and the doctors can deliver those vaccines to do the job? So the schedule represents, like everything else, a set of compromises, but it's the best set of compromises that a broad group of experts can come up with to give your child the protection that your child needs.
But I have a question. I got the measles. I got the mumps. I wasn't vaccinated at that stage of my development.
But you were lucky that you didn't get the complications of those diseases. Let me bring up another question that parents often do raise today, which is, why do we have to give so many vaccines? So they're saying maybe we should break up the vaccination program into smaller chunks. How do you deal with that question?
Well, my response is, thank goodness we have so many shots. So if you look at over the past, just 15 years, we've added vaccinations to the series, but 8 of those shots are actually for bacterial meningitis. So these are diseases you want your child protected against, and you want them protected as soon as you can, as safely as you can. And so in general, that's the 2-month well check, because between 0 and 2 months, your child is basically a clean slate. They have no real immunity to any of the diseases that are out there. And so your child is very vulnerable to these diseases. And the diseases that we protect against with vaccination are the most serious diseases, and ones that once you have this disease, there's not a whole lot we can do. And as a doctor, and I know you would agree with me, it is heartbreaking as a doctor to be able to do nothing for your patient once they have a disease. So this is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And the shots that we're giving today, I will also say, are safer than the ones that we all got on this panel growing up. And all of us got the smallpox vaccine because we're all old enough. And I will tell you that one shot has more antigens in it than the entire vaccination series that we give to kids today.
We'll be back with much more right after this.